What would be a fair trade for Essendon's Zach Merrett? We're going to go through all that right now in this video.
We've always had the passion and the iron will.
So what would a fair trade for Zach Merrett look like if it does go through with Hawthorn? And if any Hawthorn supporters are watching, I'd like your input as well, because you obviously know more about your club than I would. But I've done a little bit of research into this, and just to have a little bit of a look at what might actually go down when the trading period starts. So the first thing that we've got to look at is what picks both clubs have. So Essendon currently have picks 4, 5, 22 and 25. Hawthorn have picks 8, 26, 55 and 69. That could change to Essendon having picks 4, 5 and 6, which could be the first round compensation pick, a band 1 pick if the AFL grant that for Draper leaving, or it might be an end of first round pick. So it's either going to be picks sort of 4, 5, 6, 22 and 25, or 4, 5, 19, 22 and 25. That gives Essendon the second best draft hand in the draft, with just over 5,000 points, 5,033 points to be exact, which is just behind the West Coast Eagles. That's when you allocate, each draft pick is allocated a certain amount of points, which clubs can then use to match bids and things like that. So we have the second best draft hand in the draft. And this is relevant in the discussion because our draft hand is so good this year that we don't really need draft picks in any exchange. Now, having said that, we would probably ask for and get pick 8 from Hawthorn, because obviously that's a pick that you sort of can't really refuse when you're dealing with Zach Merrett. But other than that, there would have to be players involved. We already have enough draft picks already. We're going to have 5 picks in the top 25, in addition to the 15 rookies that we debuted this year already, and the fact that we had a number of young players drafted this time last year. We have among the youngest playing lists in the AFL. We're going to be adding another 5 18-year-olds in just over, well, in 5 to 6 weeks' time when the draft happens, or a bit after 5 to 6 weeks' time, actually. So we don't really need draft picks. What we really need is players if we're going to be fair. And that brings you to the discussion of what exactly is Merritt worth. Well, in terms of draft picks itself, I think Merritt is probably worth 2 mid-range first-round picks. So something like picks 8 and 10, 8 and 11 in theory would probably be the equivalent value to what Merritt is worth. He's not worth picks, say, 2 and 3. That's way too much. You know, if you got that for him, you'd be laughing. He's probably worth more than picks, say, 20 and 22. So something like those mid-range first-round picks in the low double digits, picks 10 and 11 or 8 and 10 or 9 and 12, something like that. He's probably worth 2 mid-range first-round picks. But we don't want 2 mid-range first-round picks. What Essendon want, at least I think, if I was doing it, we'd want 1 mid-range first-round pick and another decent player. That, to me, is what we want. Because there's a couple of different ways you can do this. You can do it a player for a player, in which case, you know, Essendon's best player for Hawthorn's best player. That's not going to happen. Hawthorn wouldn't be prepared to do that. Or you can do a player for a number of players. So you could swap Merritt for a number of players from Hawthorn without any picks, but that would involve not getting pick 8. So I don't think Essendon would be up for that. And Hawthorn, if they did that and were giving up 3 players, they wouldn't be 3 elite players. They would be players who are pretty good players and young, maybe Cam McKenzie types, maybe players like that, Connor McDonald, who are good players, but they're not Will Day, they're not Josh Weddle, they're not John Newcombe, they're not James Sicily, they're not Nick Watson, they're not Dylan Moore, those sort of players. So I think Essendon would want that 1 good draft pick in there. You could do it just for picks, you know, Merritt just for picks. But like I said, we don't want lots and lots of picks. We'd like 1 good pick, but I don't think we'd like many picks because we don't need them. Right, we need experienced players. Or you could do it for picks and players, which I think is the way it will go. I think there will be picks and players involved, and I think that would be fair for Essendon. All right, so pick 8 and a player somewhere along the way. It just depends how it gets done, what Hawthorn are prepared to give up, and how long this could drag out, because it might be one of those things where neither club are going to be prepared to move, neither club are going to be prepared to budge. and it might be one of those things that gets done late. I hope it's not. I hope there's a bit of common sense involved in this, because, it just bugs me in the trade period where clubs sort of know what the other wants, everyone knows what you're doing, and you end up pulling the trigger at the last minute, like with the Jake Stringer thing last year. Everyone knew he was going, and they waited till 5 minutes to go. I mean, couldn't the clubs just be honest with each other and just get it done the day before? I mean, do you really have to drag it out to 5 minutes to go, as if you're just going to wait for that slight 1% advantage that you might get over someone? Just get it done. All right, I just get a bit annoyed with that. So I was just having a look at the Hawthorn players according to the actual data, because we do get caught up in our opinions quite a bit with this, and I thought I'd just look at the actual numbers as to who Hawthorn's best players have been this year according to what the data says. So on the screen, that is a player rating on the right. Now, the player rating is a complicated player analysis method. I'm not going to go into how it is calculated. It takes all sorts of factors into account. Will Day is on top of it with 15.25. He is their best player. Yes, Will Day has only played the 6 games, of course, and you've got to take that into account. But even if he hadn't played the 6 games, he would be up either in first or second position, you'd think. I know a lot of people would probably have Newcombe at number 1, given his magnificent performances in all the finals matches that he's played over the last 2 years, and best on ground in both finals this year. So, yeah, got to take into account the low number of games that Day has played, of course. Now, I've listed there on the screen their best 23 players. That is in order of performance this year. So you can interpret that, you can disagree with it. Hawthorn supporters can look at it and think, I don't agree. That's just what the numbers say. Right? I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with them. That's just what they say. So you've got from 1 to 23. I've given 23 because that's in theory a full strength team with the best 23 players available. There's a few caveats to take into account. Players like Cal Shadir only played 9 games. Cam McKenzie only played 12 games and things like that. So that could affect where they would be if they'd played a full season, and injuries can affect things and all sorts of things. But as you can see, that's the 23 players. So if you were to pick a full team, that is in order, from number 1 through to number 23. So Will Day's their best player. John Newcomb's their second best player. Lloyd Meek comes up as their third best player. Josh Ward fourth, etc., etc. So I was watching Footy Classified last night as well, and Matthew Lloyd and the team there were talking about what Essendon could get and who are the players that Hawthorn would be prepared to give up. This is just a screenshot. So on the right there, the text you can see in the red, I've put that on there. That's not Channel 9, I've done that. That is ranking according to Champion Data, the ranking of the Hawthorn players as to their best player right down to their last, to their worst. And you can see there where they all rank. And you can see the untouchable players. And I kind of agree with that. They're not going to give up Will Day, 24, their best player, for a 30-year-old Merritt, even though Merritt will play probably for another 6 years. Same with Weddle. They're not going to give up him. They're not going to give up Newcombe. If Sicily wasn't captain, they might be prepared to give up Sicily, but he's 30. Look at his age, but they're not going to give him up as captain. Can you imagine that? A captain for captain trade? I doubt that would happen. But at his age, in theory, that would probably be a reasonable trade. Then they say the best available players: Nick Watson, Dylan Moore, Connor McDonald, Lloyd Meek, Josh Ward, Cal Shadir, and Cam McKenzie. Look, there's no way they're going to give up Nick Watson. Let's just be realistic. I mean, I'd love that, but they're not going to do that. I'd take that in a heartbeat, especially at his age. But you can only ask, can't you, when it regards someone like a Nick Watson? Hawthorn probably wouldn't give that up. But you could put the ball in their court and say, well, look, how badly do you want Zach Merrett? Can you imagine Nick Watson and Kako in the Essendon forward line? You'd like to see that, wouldn't you? So, look, you can only ask, and that has to be acknowledged. But you can see there, the one that stands out to me is Lloyd Meek. Not just because he's their third best player this year, but his age bracket, 27, that's an age bracket that they would look at and think, well, he's not 21. He hasn't got a full 12 years ahead of him. He's only got 5 or 6 years to go. And Essendon, of course, have lost our best ruckman in Sam Draper. So we're going to be looking for a good ruckman. With respect to Nick Bryan, it's probably a big ask for him. And I'm not totally sold on Nick Bryan either. It's a big ask for Nick Bryan to hold down the number 1 ruck position when he hasn't really established himself as, a really good AFL player yet. Not that there's not potential for Nick Bryan, but he hasn't really established himself. So I look at someone like Lloyd Meek at the age of 27, and Hawthorn would say, well, he's entering his late 20s, or will be He's a player we don't want to lose, but do we want the opposition's best player and 6-time best and fairest winner in Zach Merrett? They obviously do. Would you be prepared to give up pick 8 and Lloyd Meek for Zach Merrett? That is the one for me that I'm looking at. I know it's not a like-for-like player because Merritt is a midfielder and Lloyd Meek is not, but I just look at that and he tends to be, I think, probably their most underrated player. He's the player you probably wouldn't think is their third best player. I mean, he comes up as a better player than Josh Weddle, for example, on performance this year. And I know there's different things you can interpret. Sometimes players don't always, play to their potential each year, and sometimes the stats don't always tell the full story. I'm fully aware of all that. But I think something like that looks like, to me, that would be a trade that I think Essendon would look at, given the fact that we lost our ruckman. And I think that would be something that is fair, even though no club wants to give up good players. It's just a reality. You have to give up something if you're going to be getting the opposition's best player. I look at players like Cam McKenzie. I don't think they would give up Josh Ward, but you would take that, I think, in a heartbeat. It's difficult, but I think it's going to have to involve a pick and a player. It's going to have to involve pick 8 and perhaps one of those players that you see there on the list if Hawthorn are going to get it done. And Hawthorn, there'll be all sorts of things that Hawthorn will pull to say, well, we don't want to give this up because Merritt's 30. But he's a young 30, and we all know that, and they know it. Merritt has said himself he wants to play till 36. His preparation is meticulous, and I think he will play at that. And he's just as good now as what he was 3 or 4 years ago. He's not declined at all. So we're talking about a player that might be 30, but really he's a very, very young 30. And I think the Hawks know that. That's why they want him, okay? Because they think he can play for another 5 to 6 years. I think he can too. And Hawthorn will be saying all sorts of things. We're giving up a 23, 24-year-old to you, and you're giving us a 30-year-old, when really you've got to take into account the durability. And that's the other thing. Merritt never gets injured. He's durable, and he's going to play for a long time. So it's going to be a very interesting discussion. Now, the other option, and this could be like the nuclear option, is to not trade with Hawthorn at all and just send Merritt to the highest bidder. I kind of like that idea. The problem with that is, just say you send Merritt to, I don't know, the Gold Coast, for argument's sake, right? Probably won't happen, but just say you did that. There's nothing stopping the Gold Coast from then trading with Hawthorn and getting Merritt to Hawthorn that way, all right? So one way or the other, he's probably going to get there. So this notion of trading him to the highest bidder might work, but it doesn't mean he's not going to get there. And that opens up the possibility, of course, a 3-way trade. I always think back to that trade a quarter of a century ago where Darren Jarman wanted to go home from Hawthorn and wanted to leave and go back to the Adelaide Crows. And Essendon got involved in the trade. We didn't necessarily have to get involved in it, but we got involved in it as a 3-way trade to help facilitate it between Hawthorn and Adelaide. And we ended up getting Sean Wellman from Adelaide, and he went on to have a fantastic career for us and was a very, very good defender for us. Adelaide, obviously got a fantastic player in Darren Jarman, and Paul Salmon went to the Hawks. We also got Paul Barnard out of that. I think I won't say we won out of that deal because Darren Jarman probably is the winner out of the Adelaide Crows, probably the winner out of that with Darren Jarman. But we got Sean Wellman and Paul Barnard. So we were the club that got involved. We got involved and thought, well, we could find a way to be a winner out of a trade between two other teams. Right, Hawthorn and Adelaide are getting involved here. Well, how can we insert ourselves in this and win? And we inserted ourselves into something that wasn't our business. We made it our business, and we got 2 good players. So is there another club that could get involved and be the Essendon of that trade from 25 years ago? Another club who, I don't know who it could be, they could say, right, well, Essendon and Hawthorn are squabbling over Merritt. We could get involved as well, and that could help facilitate something from their point of view. So that's the other option we would look at, is getting a third club involved, which would hopefully, the whole idea of getting a third club involved is that it's meant to better your deal in the end. It's meant to make sure that you get the most out of that deal. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to open this up to the comments because there's all sorts of different possibilities that could go on here. It's just so many. It's almost an infinite number of possibilities that could happen. But my personal preference is Hawthorn's pick 8 and a good player. And Lloyd Meek is probably the one I'm looking at just because of our need for a ruckman. Now, what do you guys think? Is that enough? Should we ask for more? Maybe it's hard to read these things. You know, we all have different opinions of what players are worth and all that sort of thing. But in the end, I would like to see this play out for Essendon, similar to how the Chris Judd, Josh Kennedy trade ended up, where Chris Judd ended up going to Carlton, best player in the competition. Josh Kennedy, who was not as good a player as Chris Judd, went to the West Coast Eagles, and the West Coast Eagles ended up winning out of that trade simply because Josh Kennedy went on to play for another half a decade after Chris Judd had already retired. That's something I would like to see happen with Essendon, that long after Merritt has retired, we still have players running around. I think that would be something that we would be looking at. So what do you guys think? Open up to the comments. Let me know what trades you would do. I'm just giving an opinion. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. You know, I'm just offering a point of view. So let me know what your point of views are. I'd like to have a discussion about it. Have a great day, everybody. And as always, go Bombers.
Bombers fight.